Under the lantern of the pines, sleepy night story, you arrive just as the last blush of daylight melts into the tree. The forest greets you with the hush of pine needles under your boots, a soft sound like the forest is letting you step deeper without announcing you to the rest of the wild. The air carries the coolness of evening, brushed with the faint sweetness of resin and distant earth warmed by the day. You pause at the edge of the clearing, your campsite for the night, that it's not large, just enough space for your tent, a small fire ring, and a view of the sky that seems impossibly wide compared to the narrow glimpses you get between city rooftops. Already, the first stars are beginning to blink awake, shy and scattered. You drop your pack and stand still for a moment, letting the quiet press against you that it's not an empty quiet. It's alive. From somewhere deeper in the trees, the slow, measured rhythm of a woodpecker echoes, a sound that feels almost ceremonial in its steadiness that a breeze stirs, carrying the whisper of leaves and the scent of something faintly floral, maybe wild honeysuckle, hidden in the undergrowth. Your tent is small but familiar, an old friend that has weathered rain, wind, and countless nights before this one. That you set it up slowly, not rushing. Each task, unfurling the fabric, clicking the poles into place, staking the corners, becomes part of a rhythm. The kind of motion that is both physical and meditative, that be why the time it stands firm. The sky has deepened to a rich indigo. You turn your attention to the fire. The woodpile is small but carefully chosen. Dry pine for quick lighting, heavier oak to last through the night. The first spark catches with a sigh, the flame curling into being as if it had been waiting for your arrival. It grows slowly, stretching upward, and soon the clearing is bathed in a warm, golden glow. The flames sway and shift, throwing light onto the trunks of the pines, which seem taller in firelight, their shadows long and watchful. You set the small metal pot near the embers, filling it with water from your canteen as it heats. You prepare the tea, chamomile, with a touch of wild honey you bought from a roadside stand earlier in the week. The moment the steam begins to curl upward, you breathe it in, and it feels like your chest loosens, like some invisible weight you didn't even know you carried has begun to lift. When you take the first sip, the taste is soft and familiar, but it's not just the flavor. It's the way the warmth travels through you, grounding you in this moment. The fire crackles beside you, somewhere high above. A branch creaks in the wind, as if the forest is stretching its limbs for the night ahead. You lean back in the old wooden chair and watch the darkness deepen. More stars appear, until the sky feels heavy with them. The longer you look, the more you notice. The faint dusting of the Milky Way, the slow drift of a satellite, the sudden, brief flash of a falling star. You make a wish, though you know it's more about the ritual than the result. The forest begins to change as the night takes hold. The day creatures have quieted, and the nocturnal ones are waking. The owl calls again, low, deliberate, as if it's speaking directly to the darkness. Somewhere closer, a rustle in the underbrush hints at a small animal. Maybe a rabbit, maybe something you'll never see. You don't need to, it's enough to know it's there, living its own quiet life parallel to yours. Hours pass without urgency. The fire burns lower, its light now a deep orange glow rather than sharp flame. You feed it another log and listen to the way it hisses as the sap warms and pops. The wind shifts, carrying a cooler breath now, and you pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders. Your thoughts begin to drift. You think of the road that led you here, the winding two-lane highway, the old bridge, the gas station with a single dim light buzzing over the pumps. You think of the conversations you've had in recent weeks, the ones that felt like noise more than connection. Here, You don't have to answer to anyone. Here, the questions are simpler. Is the fire warm enough? Is the sky clear enough for stars? Is the tea sweet enough? At some point, you notice the fireflies. First, there are only a few, drifting lazily between the trees. Then, as if on cue, more appear, tiny lanterns moving in a slow, unhurried dance. They flicker in and out, some near the firelight, some deep in the dark where they're almost invisible until they flare again. It feels like the forest is celebrating quietly. Just for you. A faint sound begins to join the night. Soft at first, then more insistent. Rain. Not a storm, just a gentle sprinkle that taps against the leaves and needles, a rhythm that blends perfectly with the crackle of the fire. You pull your chair closer to the tent and watch the way the firelight glistens off each raindrop. The air smells even richer now, the scent of pine, deepening, the earth waking under the touch of water. Inside the tent, you stretch out on your sleeping bag, listening. The rain on the canvas is steady and hypnotic, like a lullaby. In the distance, the owl calls one last time before silence takes its place. The fire outside burns low, the embers still glowing faintly. A small sun in the middle of the forest night. As your eyes grow heavier, the world feels impossibly far away. No roads, no clocks, no demands. Just the forest, the rain, and the knowledge that you are exactly where you're meant to be. And before you drift into sleep, you think you hear something. Not a sound, exactly, but a feeling. The forest breathing, slow and steady, keeping watch. You arrive in the late afternoon, when the sun is still warm but beginning its slow descent toward the edge of the trees. The road behind you has already faded into memory, just a ribbon of gravel that disappeared into green. And now there is only the forest. It is vast, breathing, and alive, yet it welcomes you with a silence that feels more like an embrace than an absence. You stand still for a moment at the trailhead, listening. The forest speaks in many voices, the rustle of leaves, the creak of swaying branches, the faint click of pine cones shifting high above. A light breeze stirs the needles overhead, and they respond with a sound like soft rain. Though the sky above is clear and wide, the air is cool and carries the scent of resin and damp earth, sharpened by the faint sweetness of wildflowers hidden somewhere in the undergrowth. Your pack is heavy on your back, but not burdensome. Its weight is the weight of what you've chosen to bring. Nothing more. A small tent, a sleeping bag, a metal pot, a wool blanket, and enough food for the night. There is something freeing about needing so little. You begin the walk to the clearing you've chosen, following a path that narrows as it winds deeper between the trees. The sunlight filters through the branches in golden shafts, dust motes floating lazily in the beams. Birdsong trails after you, first from one side, then the other, as if the forest is keeping pace with your steps. The trail bends gently uphill, the ground beneath your boots soft with layers of old needles. The further you go, the more the outside world falls away. The hum of the road is gone, replaced by the layered quiet of the wild. You feel your shoulders loosen without thinking about it, your breath settling into the rhythm of your steps. When you reach the clearing, the light has shifted. The sun is low enough now to paint the tops of the pines in amber, leaving the lower branches in cool shadow. This is the place you've been picturing, a wide, level patch of earth ringed by tall trees, with just enough space for a tent, a small fire, and the open view of the sky you've been craving. You shrug off your pack and let it rest against a fallen log. The sound of the forest is different here, a little more open, a little more airy. A single bird calls from somewhere high above, the note long and sweet, fading into the distance. Setting up your tent is a slow, deliberate process. You take your time with each step, unrolling the fabric, fitting the poles together, anchoring them into the earth. The motions are familiar, almost meditative, the kind you could do in darkness and still not miss a step. That be why the time you stake the last corner. The air has cooled just enough to raise a pleasant shiver along your arms. You turn to the fire pit, a simple circle of stones that looks as though it's been here for years. The wood you've gathered along the trail is dry and light, perfect for catching quickly. With the scrape of a match, the flame curls into being. A small flicker at first, then a steady tongue of orange that licks at the dry bark. The smell of burning pine drifts upward, rich and sweet, blending with the deeper scent of the forest. You set the metal pot on the edge of the stones and fill it with water from your canteen. The fire warms it slowly, sending up a thin ribbon of steam that curls into the cooling air. When you drop in a spoonful of chamomile leaves and drizzle in honey from a small glass jar, the fragrance blooms instantly, as if the forest has decided to join you for tea. You sit back in the old wooden chair you brought, the one that creaks but never complains, and wrap your hands around the warm cup. The heat seeps into your fingers, and the first sip loosens something deep inside you that it's not just the taste of the tea. It's the stillness it carries. You let it settle in you as the fire crackles and the sky shifts from gold to indigo. The first stars appear before you notice them, faint and tentative, like shy guests. Arriving early, you watch as more join them, dotting the sky in slow, deliberate patterns until the whole dome above you glitters. Somewhere beyond the tree-line, an owl calls, low and resonant. You answer by simply listening. The fire grows steady and strong, its light dancing across the trunks of the pines. You can see the grain of the bark in sharp detail where the flames touch, and beyond that, the shadows deepen into rich, impenetrable darkness. It is not an unfriendly dark, just the kind that belongs to places without street lamps or windows, where the night can be itself without apology. You eat a simple meal by the fire, the flavors sharpened by hunger and the open air. When you've finished, you lean back in your chair, your legs stretched toward the heat. The wood pops softly, sending a spray of sparks upward to vanish among the stars. You find yourself breathing in time with the sway of the trees, as if the forest has set a slow, steady rhythm just for you. Hours pass this way without urgency. The night deepens, and with it comes the soft chorus of the nocturnal world, the whisper of leaves shifting, the faint rustle of small paws in the undergrowth, the occasional drop of water falling from a high branch onto the earth below. Your eyelids grow heavy, but you resist closing them just yet. There's still something to see, something to feel. In this hour when the world feels half asleep, when you finally rise, the fire is low and glowing. You step into your tent, the fabric cool beneath your fingers, and settle into your sleeping bag. Outside, the forest continues its quiet conversations, the sounds weaving into your dreams before you've even drifted fully away. The forest greeted you long before you reached its heart. It began as a quiet change in the wind, a soft, resin-scented whisper that drifted through the open car window as you drove the last stretch of winding road. The air grew cooler here, lighter somehow, as though it had been filtered through layers of pine needles and moss. The moment you stepped out and your feet touched the soft, uneven ground at the trailhead, the hum of the outside world faded behind you. The trail itself was a gentle ribbon, winding between towering pines whose roots curled like the fingers of ancient giants. Shafts of late afternoon sunlight slanted between the trunks, painting the earth in slow-moving patterns that shifted with every breeze. Somewhere high above, a lone bird sang, not hurried, not urgent, but in long, lingering notes that seemed content to simply float in the air. You carried only what you needed, a tent neatly rolled, a sleeping bag, a pack of supplies, and a lantern whose glass was slightly fogged from past use. The straps of the pack pressed gently against your shoulders as you walked, but the weight felt grounding rather than burdensome. With each step, the world beyond the forest slipped further away, replaced by the deep, quiet rhythm of your breathing and the crunch of dry pine needles beneath your boots. After some time, you reached a small clearing where the forest seemed to open its arms just wide enough to welcome a traveler. The grass here was soft, the earth dry and firm, and on one side a small brook whispered as it made its way around smooth stones. The sun, now lowering toward the horizon, spilled gold across the water, turning its surface into a rippling sheet of light. You set your pack down slowly, feeling the way the stillness of the forest wrapped itself around you. There was no rush here, no ticking clock, no urgent voices, only the patient silence of nature. Even the air seemed to move differently, brushing your skin in soft, unhurried strokes. The tent went up easily, its fabric breathing with the wind as you secured the final peg. You placed your lantern just outside the entrance, though you wouldn't need it yet. The light of day still lingered, though it had begun to soften, trading the sharp brilliance of afternoon for the warm, muted glow of early evening. You gathered a few fallen branches for the campfire. Not too many, just enough to create a small, steady flame. As the first spark caught, the scent of wood smoke rose and mingled with the fresh scent of pine and damp earth. The fire began to speak in its own language, crackles, soft pops, the occasional sigh as a log shifted. You found yourself simply watching it for a while, letting its hypnotic movement settle into your mind. The forest around you shifted almost imperceptibly as the light dimmed. Birds that had been busy with their evening calls now grew quieter, their songs replaced by the slow, deliberate chirp of crickets. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped from a high branch, falling in a rhythm you could not measure but somehow felt was perfect. Dinner was a simple affair. Warm broth poured into a small enamel mug, a few slices of bread, and the quiet pleasure of eating without distraction. You listened to the fire as you ate, each bite carrying the taste of the open AI or as twilight deepened. You lit the lantern. Its glow was soft and golden, casting a small circle of light that reached just far enough to touch the edges of your camp. Beyond that circle, the forest stretched into gentle shadow, each tree standing like a silent sentinel. You could feel the weight of their presence, not heavy or intimidating, but steady and protective, as though they had been watching over travelers for hundreds of years. You lay back on the cool grass, the fire's warmth at your feet, and tilted your gaze upward. Through the thin weave of the treetops, the first stars began to appear, shy at first, then slowly, more and more, until the sky above was dusted with a quiet scattering of light. Somewhere in that endless sky, whole worlds existed, yet here, on this patch of earth, everything you needed felt within arm's reach. The forest seemed to breathe with you now. Every inhale carried the scent of pine. Every exhale disappeared into the night air. The lantern's light flickered gently, casting slow-moving shadows across your tent. The brook continued its quiet journey nearby, a lullaby of flowing water that seemed to wash away the last traces of thought. Time lost its edges. You couldn't tell if minutes or hours passed as you lay there, listening. Occasionally, a leaf would drift loose and fall, its descent slow enough that you could almost hear it part the air. When sleep began to arrive, it did so gently, not as a sudden weight, but as a soft hand on your shoulder, guiding you toward rest. You slipped into your tent, zipped the flap, and lay down inside your sleeping bag. The lantern now just a faint glow through the fabric. Outside, The forest kept its watch. The fire burned lower, its embers pulsing like the slow heartbeat of the night. The crickets continued their song, steady and unbroken, until their rhythm became your own. And as you drifted into sleep, the last thing you felt was the steady presence of the forest around you, vast, timeless, and quietly alive. The night had settled fully now, draping the forest in a velvet stillness so complete that it felt almost sacred. The last threads of twilight had long since faded behind the tree-line, leaving only the faint glow of a silvered moon that filtered through the pine needles in soft, broken patterns. The campfire had burned low, its once bright flames now reduced to a slow, pulsing bed of embers, glowing like the heart of some ancient creature sleeping beneath the earth. That I sat there, wrapped in the warmth of my blanket, my back against the cool, solid trunk of a tree that had stood in this place for decades, maybe centuries. Its bark was rough beneath my fingers, grounding me in a way that felt strangely comforting. Above, the pine branches swayed ever so slightly in the whisper of a breeze, and each shift sent a subtle rain of needles drifting to the forest floor. The sounds of the day were gone now. No more distant woodpecker calls, no more rustling of squirrels racing between branches. In their place was a deeper, slower rhythm, the steady hum of crickets, the occasional distant splash from the creek, and, somewhere far off, the low, rolling call of an owl. These sounds didn't disturb the silence. They were the silence, folded neatly into it like threads in an endless fabric. I leaned forward slightly, holding my hands close to the embers. The heat radiated upward in lazy waves, carrying with it the sweet, smoky scent of burning pine wood. Each breath felt full, cleaner than air I had ever breathed in the city. It was as if the forest itself was filtering out every burden, every weight I'd brought with me, and replacing it with something lighter, purer. Somewhere to my right, I caught the faintest flicker, not bright enough to be a flame, but more like a reflection. I turned my head, slowly, not wanting to break the moment. There, beyond a thicket of ferns, a small patch of the ground seemed to glow faintly. Fireflies. They blinked in a rhythm too perfect to be random, each tiny light rising into the air and then vanishing into the darkness. One floated close, hovering at the edge of the firelight as if it was curious about me. Its glow pulsed 3 times before it drifted off, swallowed by the shadows. That I smiled to myself, my mind wandering to the thought that maybe the forest was aware of me. Not in the way we notice a stranger passing on the street, but in a slower, more ancient way. A kind of recognition. After all, the forest had been here long before I arrived, and it would remain long after I left. And yet, here we were, sharing a single night together. The breeze shifted again, carrying with it the scent of damp moss and the faint, sweet perfume of wildflowers I hadn't seen in the daylight. I closed my eyes and simply breathed, letting the scents weave through my thoughts. Somewhere in that stillness, I could almost hear the forest breathing back, an unhurried, patient exhale that matched the rise and fall of my own chest. When I opened my eyes, the moon had climbed higher, its pale light painting silver outlines along the edges of leaves and branches. My tent stood a few steps away, its fabric glowing faintly in the moonlight like a soft lantern. The shadows it cast stretched across the clearing in long, gentle shapes that shifted whenever the breeze moved through the trees. That I let my gaze wander upward, past the treetops, to the scattering of stars overhead. Without city lights to wash them away, they looked impossibly bright, as if someone had shaken a handful of diamond dust across an endless, black canvas. Some twinkled steadily, while others pulsed in a way that reminded me of the fireflies below. The sky and the earth, mirroring each other in quiet, unspoken harmony that I didn't feel the urge to speak. There was nothing to say and no one to say it to. And that, somehow, felt like a gift. Time here didn't move in minutes or hours. It moved in the slow sway of the branches, in the cooling of the embers, in the soft, measured blinking of the stars that I poured myself a final cup of tea from the tin mug I'd set beside the fire earlier. It was cooler now, but the faint taste of chamomile was still there, blending with the smokiness in the air. I cradled it in my hands, letting its warmth seep into my fingers as I listened to the night. Somewhere in the distance, a fox barked, short, sharp, and then gone. The crickets adjusted their rhythm, a subtle shift that made me wonder how many small signals like that I was missing, hidden conversations between creatures that had nothing to do with me, and yet surrounded me entirely. I felt a quiet kind of gratitude then, not for anything big or dramatic, but for the simple fact that I was here, now, in this place where the world felt wider and softer at the same time. The fire was low enough now that I could hear the faint crackle of wood splitting apart. Inside the embers, I knew I should probably crawl into the tent soon, but I stayed where I was, unwilling to let go of the night. Just YET wasn't just camping. It was being part of something that didn't need me, but allowed me to be here anyway. And in that deep, dark stillness, I felt myself becoming quieter too. The fire had long since collapsed into a bed of glowing embers, each breath of wind coaxing a faint orange sigh from beneath the ash. The night was at its deepest now, that strange hour when time feels suspended, when the forest holds its breath and the world seems made entirely of quiet. Above the canopy, the stars still shone, but their brilliance had softened, as though they were yielding their place to the coming day. The air carried a cooler edge, and every sound, the creak of the trees, the distant rush of a stream, the occasional wing beat of an unseen bird, was wrapped in a hushed reverence. You lay back in your sleeping bag, your head cushioned on the folded sweater you'd chosen over a pillow, and you let your eyes half close. The tent door was unzipped, and from where you rested, you could see the outline of the trees swaying ever so slightly against the night sky. Somewhere far off, a single note rang, perhaps the call of an early bird, or perhaps just the settling of wood in the forest. It was impossible to tell, and it didn't matter. Out here, there was no need to name every sound. Out here, the forest spoke in its own language, and you were content just to listen. A faint mist began to gather low to the ground, curling between the tree trunks like threads of silver. It moved with a slowness that made you wonder if time itself had softened. The mist didn't obscure the world. Rather, it made everything seem gentler, like the edges had been blurred so that nothing could be sharp or hurried. And then you saw it, a soft glow through the trees. It wasn't the white glare of a flashlight or the orange flicker of a torch. This was different. Pale, silvery, almost like moonlight, though the moon was hidden now behind the western ridge. The light didn't move toward you or away. It simply lingered there, steady and patient, as if it had always been part of the forest, and you were only now noticing it. For a moment, you considered sitting up, pulling on your shoes, and walking toward it. But the thought passed almost instantly. This was not a light to be chased. This was a light to be honored from a distance, the way you honor the quiet before someone begins to speak. You lay there, watching, and in that gaze, a memory surfaced, a time in your life when you'd felt just as still, just as safe, just as quietly whole. It wasn't a grand memory, not one of those milestones you mark in a photo album. It was small, a rainy afternoon, a cup of tea, a warm blanket. And yet it held you now like an anchor. The glow eventually softened, fading into the mist until it was gone, or perhaps until the world grew too bright for it to be seen. The first hints of dawn were unfurling in the sky. Not yet colors, but the idea of them. The deep navy above began to pale, and a single bird, braver than the rest, sang two clear notes, as if to test the air. You rose slowly, stepping outside the tent. The ground was cool beneath your feet, the grass tipped with tiny beads of dew. Each breath you drew tasted different now, fresher, lighter, as though the forest itself was exhaling with you. In the east, a faint blush spread along the horizon. The trees were no longer shadows, but living silhouettes, their shapes more distinct with each passing moment. You stood there, still and unhurried, watching the forest wake. And as the sun's first ray touched the highest branches, you felt something deep and unspoken settle within you. A quiet understanding that whatever that soft glow in the night had been, it had left something behind. Not a mystery to be solved, not a message to be deciphered, just a gift, unwrapped slowly in the deepest hours of night. The forest had grown even quieter since the last ember of conversation faded between us. The fire crackled softly, its flames dancing lazily in the still night air, casting a warm amber glow that trembled against the trunks of nearby trees. Above us, the night sky spread endlessly, a dark, velvet canvas stitched with stars, each one blinking gently as if to keep us company. The scent of pine needles mixed with the faint smokiness of burning wood, a fragrance that seemed to wrap itself around every breath we took, grounding us in this moment. Far from the rush of the world, somewhere in the distance, a small stream murmured to itself, its water gliding over smooth stones, the sound like a whispered lullaby. If I closed my eyes, I could almost see it, silver threads weaving between rocks, catching starlight in their ripples. Every now and then, a soft breeze drifted through the camp, carrying with it the cool freshness of the forest night and the rustling of leaves high above. It was a slow, gentle kind of wind, the sort that didn't push or demand, but rather moved as if it was remembering the path it had taken through countless nights before this one that you were sitting just across from me, your hands curled loosely around a mug of tea. Steam rose from it in thin, slow spirals, catching the light of the fire before vanishing into the air. We didn't speak much. Words didn't seem necessary here. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full, in a way that only nature can make it full. Every sound, every flicker of movement, every scent felt like it belonged to an unspoken story we were both living in together. From time to time, the forest offered us little reminders that we were not alone. A twig snapped faintly somewhere beyond the firelight. The low hoot of an owl drifted through the night, followed by a long pause and another call from farther away, perhaps its mate answering. In the underbrush, something small moved, rustling dry leaves before slipping back into stillness. Each sound carried no threat, only the quiet reassurance that life was continuing all around us, each creature playing its part in the slow rhythm of the night. The fire had burned low, its edges turning to white ash, and the heat it gave off was softer now, more like a gentle hug than a steady flame. I leaned back against my camping chair, letting my head rest so I could look up. The stars seemed closer now, as if the longer we stayed here, the more the night decided to trust us with its secrets. One star in particular shone brighter than the rest, low in the sky, just above the treetops. And for some reason, I found myself staring at it for a long time, wondering how many nights it had washed over campers like us. The air was so still that even the faint crackle of a coal falling in the fire sounded loud. You shifted in your seat, pulling your blanket tighter around your shoulders. In the firelight, your face looked relaxed, your eyes half closed, the corners of your lips turned up in the hint of a smile. It struck me how different this was from the rush of days past. How easily the forest peeled away layers of hurry and noise until all that was left was something quiet, unguarded, and real. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the glow, I thought I saw movement. A flicker, quick, like the twitch of a branch or the dart of a small animal. I didn't say anything at first. It didn't feel urgent, and I didn't want to break the fragile spell of the night. But when it happened again, I found my gaze lingering there. Whatever it was small, no bigger than a rabbit, perhaps, and it seemed to be lingering just at the edge of the light. Watching, I reached slowly for the lantern beside me. But before I could even touch it, a sound drifted through the air, soft, high-pitched, and almost musical. It wasn't a bird's call, nor the whistle of the wind. It was something else, something curious. You glanced up at me, your brow lifting in a silent question. I just smiled faintly and tilted my head toward the sound. It came again, like a faint chime, and then again, a little closer this time. The fire popped sharply, sending a tiny shower of sparks into the air, and the sound stopped. I half expected whatever it was to retreat back into the darkness, but instead, the faint rustling began again, moving slowly, deliberately, toward us. There was no fear in me, only a deep, childlike curiosity. Out here, the night was not a thing to be wary of. It was an old friend, one that sometimes liked to surprise us. When at last the shape emerged into the glow, it was not a rabbit, nor any forest creature I had expected. It was a fox, small, with fur the color of autumn leaves and eyes that gleamed in the firelight like polished amber. It paused just beyond the reach of the flames, its head tilted slightly, as if measuring whether we were worth trusting. In its mouth, it carried something, a small bundle of leaves and twigs, bound together in a way that seemed too deliberate to be random. You inhaled softly, and I could see the same wonder on your face that I felt in my chest. The fox took a few more careful steps forward, then laid the little bundle gently on the ground before us. For a moment, it simply looked at us, its ears twitching in the faint breeze. Then, without a sound, it turned and padded back into the forest, its tail a slow wave of white-tipped fur before it vanished into the shadows. That we sat there in silence, staring at the bundle. It looked almost like a tiny nest, woven together with care, strands of grass, small bits of moss, and even a single feather tucked neatly inside. I reached out and lifted it carefully, feeling the soft give of the materials, the way they held together despite their fragility. There was no obvious reason for the fox to bring it to us. No explanation. And perhaps that was the point. Not everything in the forest is meant to be explained. You leaned closer, studying it in the firelight. "It's beautiful," you whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever quiet magic was at work here. I nodded, still feeling the warmth of the moment. In the stillness that followed, I imagined the fox weaving this, not out of instinct alone, but with some small intention. Maybe it had simply been curious about us. Maybe it had seen our firelight and decided to leave a gift, the way some travelers leave a mark or a token to say they've passed this way. We placed the bundle gently on the small wooden table between our chairs. Neither of us suggested throwing it aside or burning it. It wasn't just forest debris anymore. It was part of tonight. And somehow, I knew that long after we left this place, I would remember the sight of that fox, the way it moved, and the way it trusted us enough to come close. The night deepened around us. The fire's glow softened further, and the cool air wrapped itself around our shoulders like a quiet shawl. Somewhere, far off, the owl called again. The stream kept murmuring. The trees stood tall and patient, as they had for centuries. And we, small, temporary visitors, sat together in that circle of light, holding onto the unshakable peace that only a night like this can give. The forest had settled into its truest form, a breathing, living cathedral of quiet. Every branch seemed to have found its resting place. Every leaf seemed content to remain perfectly still, as if afraid that even the gentlest movement might disturb the fragile balance of night. Above, the moon floated like a silver lantern, its light falling in soft threads through the tall pines and spreading across the ground like an unrolled ribbon. The campfire at my side had grown modest, its earlier flames now reduced to a gentle, glowing heart. The embers pulsed faintly, each one releasing a slow sigh of heat that curled upward into the darkness and vanished without sound. The air carried the faint scent of pine resin and damp earth, a fragrance so ancient and unspoiled it felt like something my soul had known before my body was even born. Somewhere, in the far reaches of the forest, an owl let out a low, hollow call, not sharp, not hurried, but thoughtful, like a question meant only for the trees to hear. The sound lingered for a moment, then was swallowed whole by the darkness. In that silence, my own breathing seemed loud, each inhale drawing in cool night air, each exhale drifting out in a slow cloud, visible in the dim firelight before dissolving into nothing. The forest was not empty. It never truly was. Beneath the layers of quiet, there were movements, soft, almost imperceptible. The whisper of a small animal's paws brushing over dry leaves somewhere in the undergrowth. The distant trickle of water, so far away it felt more like a memory than a sound. Even the trees themselves made a sound if you listened long enough. A low creak as their great trunks shifted under the slow rhythm of time that I reached forward and placed another small log on the fire. The wood caught reluctantly, crackling in protest before settling into a slow burn, the flames curling around it like a careful embrace. The light from the fire flickered against the inside of my tent, painting the fabric with shapes that shifted gently, silhouettes of branches, the soft curve of my backpack leaning against a pole, the subtle shadow of my own arm as I moved as I leaned back against a log I had set as a seat and let my eyes wander upward. Between the black pillars of the pine trunks, the night sky stretched wide, scattered with stars. They were not the sharp, cold points of light you saw in the city. Here they were softer, almost breathing, each one glowing with a pulse too slow for the human eye to truly catch. The Milky Way arched faintly above, a quiet road of light crossing the heavens, leading to places I would never touch but could still dream of. As I sat there, I began to notice how time felt different here. In the city, an hour always felt like something measured, something counted, calculated, used up. Here, an hour felt like a living thing, unbroken and whole. The seconds didn't march past. They drifted, like small leaves floating lazily on a slow-moving stream. I could feel myself becoming part of that slowness, my thoughts stretching out and settling in the same rhythm as the forest. A breeze came. Not a sharp wind, but a tender stirring of the air, as if the forest had decided to take one deep, measured breath. It carried with it the sound of the river that ran deeper in the woods. That sound was different here in the stillness of night. Not the bright chatter it made in daylight, but a hushed, secretive tone, as though the water was telling old stories to the rocks it passed over. The firelight caught something in the air, a tiny moth, drifting slowly, its wings like pale parchment. It circled once above the flames before disappearing into the dark. In that small, delicate motion, I felt a truth about the forest, that life here didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't waste. Everything moved when it was ready and rested when it needed to. I thought of the day just past, the hike here, the way the sunlight had filtered through the morning mist, the quiet joy of finding this little clearing far enough from the trail to feel like it belonged only to me. I thought of the way the ground had felt under my boots, firm but alive, and the way the air had tasted when I first stopped to drink from my canteen. Cool, almost sweet, as if the trees themselves had gifted it to me. And now, in this deep hour of the night, I felt the day folding itself neatly into the past, replaced by something older, slower, and softer. The forest seemed to lean closer, not with menace, but with intimacy, as if it wanted to share something with me. Something it couldn't say in daylight. That I closed my eyes for a moment, and the darkness behind my eyelids felt no different from the darkness around me. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, steady, unhurried. Somewhere nearby, a twig snapped, not loudly, but enough to let me know I wasn't entirely alone. Perhaps it was a deer, stepping carefully through the shadows. Perhaps it was just the forest adjusting itself in the cool night air. Either way, the sound did not alarm me. It felt natural, a part of the quiet conversation between all living things out here. That I shifted slightly, pulling my blanket tighter around my shoulders, the fabric holding in the gentle heat from the fire. My gaze wandered again to the stars. I imagined each one as a small campfire of its own, burning far away in another forest of another world, watched over by someone else who was also sitting in quiet wonder. The night deepened. The air grew cooler, and the shadows around me thickened. The embers of the fire glowed more brightly against the dark, like the last warm thoughts before sleep. And in that stillness, I felt a kind of peace I had not known in years, a peace that asked nothing of me except to be present, to breathe, to listen. The night deepened in layers, like soft blankets being drawn one after another over the world. Above, the sky was a deep, infinite navy, scattered with stars so numerous they seemed to shimmer with their own secret rhythm. Some glowed faintly, like distant candles, while others burned brighter, flickering in and out of sight as thin veils of mist drifted between us and the heavens. The fire beside me had settled into a low, steady hum of heat. Its heart was a bed of crimson coals, each one pulsing gently as if breathing. Occasionally, a small flame would rise and curl, licking at the edges of the charred wood before fading back into the embers. The smell of pine resin mixed with the earthy fragrance of damp moss and fresh wood smoke, creating a scent that felt both ancient and comforting, as though the forest itself was exhaling slowly, inviting me to rest. The air was so still that even the smallest sounds carried clearly. The faint rustle of leaves shifting somewhere high in the canopy, the gentle trickle of a hidden stream nearby, and the distant, almost imperceptible hoot of an owl calling from far beyond the camp. Each sound seemed to arrive not abruptly, but like it had traveled a long, winding path through the forest before reaching my ears. That I lay back slightly, my shoulders resting against a log, letting the warmth from the fire soak into my skin. Every breath felt slower now, deeper, as if matching the unhurried pace of the night. The light from the flames painted the surrounding trees in warm amber tones, turning their trunks into tall sentinels standing watch. Just beyond their reach, the darkness thickened, soft but impenetrable, holding its own quiet mysteries. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked, not sharply, but with a gentle, deliberate snap. My ears pricked up, but there was no rush of fear, only curiosity. In this deep forest, life moved cautiously, with respect for the silence. Perhaps it was a deer stepping carefully between the ferns, or a fox pausing mid-step to sniff the air. I imagined their quiet eyes reflecting just a hint of the firelight before they turned back into the shadows. The stars above seemed to grow brighter with every passing minute. Between them, Ribbons of faint cloud drifted lazily, changing shape so slowly it felt like time itself had softened. I traced constellations the way I had as a child, naming the ones I remembered, inventing new ones for the shapes I could not place. Above one tall pine, three stars aligned perfectly, forming a small, delicate arrow pointing deeper into the forest, as if the night was hinting at a path unseen. The forest air held a kind of magic that city nights never knew, the kind that could only be felt when surrounded by miles of unbroken nature. It was the kind of air that carried the scent of blooming wildflowers you couldn't see, the whisper of animals you would never meet, the weight of centuries in which trees had grown, fallen, and grown again. I felt like a guest in a cathedral made of living wood and stone, the fire my candle, the stars my stained glass. Somewhere, the stream's sound became clearer. It was a gentle, musical trickle, the water slipping over smooth stones and weaving between roots. I closed my eyes for a moment and simply listened. The fire's soft crackle behind me, the water's flowing song ahead, and the slow sigh of the wind high above, all blending into a natural lullaby that seemed to loosen every thought from my mind. I don't know how much time passed. In the forest at night, minutes and hours feel the same, measured only by the movement of shadows and the cooling of the air. I noticed the fire's light was now smaller, its glow pooling low to the ground, and the mist in the trees had thickened just enough to blur their outlines. The world felt softer, as if viewed through half-closed eyes that I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and let myself sink deeper into the stillness. The ground beneath me was firm yet strangely comforting, its scent rich with the life of the forest floor, leaves, soil, and the faint sweetness of distant flowers carried here by the wind. Every so often, a faint rustle in the undergrowth reminded me that I was not alone. Life was here, everywhere, watching quietly, moving unseen, and then a single firefly drifted into view. Its light blinked slowly, warm and golden, as it floated lazily through the night air. It hovered above the embers for a moment, then glided toward the darkness, its tiny globe bobbing like a lantern carried by an invisible hand. Soon, another followed, and another, until the air around the campsite was speckled with soft, moving stars. They danced gently in the air, their lights appearing and vanishing in a slow, hypnotic rhythm that I felt my eyelids growing heavier, my body sinking further into the warmth of the blanket. Somewhere deep in the forest, the owl called again, a long, drawn-out note that seemed to stretch into the night. The sound blended with the fire's fading hiss, the water's endless murmur, and the steady, unshakable heartbeat of the forest itself. The night held me like an old friend, protective, quiet, and endlessly patient. The night deepened around the small campsite, but it did not feel like darkness was closing in. Instead, it felt as though the forest was wrapping itself more warmly, more protectively around us. The air had cooled to a perfect, refreshing stillness. Each inhale filled the chest with a scent so distinct it could only belong to this hidden clearing, a blend of moss, pine needles, and the faint sweetness of distant wildflowers that had closed for the night but still whispered their fragrance into the breeze. The fire was no longer crackling loudly but had settled into a quiet, steady rhythm, each flame rising and bowing as if in slow conversation with the stars above. Those stars had multiplied since the last time I looked, as if the sky had been holding back until the forest was ready to receive their full brilliance. I lay back against the soft weight of the blanket, feeling the gentle unevenness of the earth beneath me, a reminder that nature does not try to smooth itself for our comfort, and yet somehow it offers exactly what we need. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, its voice deep and steady, like a guardian announcing that all was well. The sound echoed between the trees and then dissolved into the night. My eyes traced the shapes of the branches overhead, some silhouetted against the stars, others only shadows within shadows. The forest seemed endless, but instead of feeling lost within it, I felt anchored, as though every tree knew where I was and had agreed to watch over me until morning. I shifted slightly, the blanket rustling softly, and let my fingertips brush against the cool earth. I could feel tiny granules of soil, the texture of fallen leaves, the faintest vibration of the living ground beneath. The wind moved again, brushing my cheek, carrying with it a sound so soft it was almost unnoticeable, the faint ripple of water, perhaps from a hidden stream not far away. The thought of it made me close my eyes and imagine following that sound, stepping barefoot over the moss, feeling the damp coolness of stone until I would find it, a narrow ribbon of water reflecting moonlight like liquid glass. The idea stayed with me as I listened more intently. The fire popped once, sending a spark spiraling upward, a tiny star trying to join its celestial family before fading into the dark. My breathing matched the pace of the forest, slow and deep, as though my body had finally synchronized with its ancient rhythm. The forest did not rush. It had seen countless nights like this, countless fires, countless travelers who sought its quiet. And yet, in this moment, it felt as though the night belonged entirely to me. The stars shimmered above like distant campfires of their own, each one telling a story too far away to hear, but close enough to feel. A part of me wondered how many eyes across the world were looking at them right now. How many souls were finding the same comfort in their light? The thought brought a quiet smile, and I turned slightly toward the fire, letting its warmth touch my skin again. I knew I could sit here for hours, simply watching it breathe, feeding it only when necessary, as though tending to a small, living thing. Every movement felt deliberate, every sound meaningful. Even the silence was not empty. It was full, holding the weight of everything unspoken. The forest, the stars, the fire, and I were in silent agreement. Nothing needed to be changed. Everything was already enough. The forest had grown even quieter now, not the silence of emptiness, but the hush of a world that was resting, a silence full of life, hidden and subtle. The campfire had burned down to a bed of glowing embers, each one pulsing softly, like the forest's own heartbeat. A faint ribbon of smoke rose into the cool night, curling and vanishing into the black velvet sky. Above, the stars had grown sharper, clearer, and more numerous. The longer you looked, the more they appeared, tiny pinpricks of light scattered across infinity, like forgotten memories floating in the vastness that I sat just outside the tent, wrapped in a blanket, watching the embers. The air was so still that I could hear my own breath and the distant, almost secret rustle of leaves far away. Somewhere, deep in the forest, an owl called, slow, patient, as if it had been watching this forest for centuries. The sound drifted across the clearing, settled into the trees, and was answered faintly by another owl, farther away. The scent of pine surrounded me, fresh and cool, carrying with it the faint sweetness of moss and earth. Every inhale felt like a kind of medicine, washing away the weight of the day. I leaned back slightly, resting my head against the soft fabric of the tent wall, and let my eyes wander to the sky again. The Milky Way stretched above me, a pale river of light that seemed to flow endlessly from one side of the world to the other. Somewhere in the middle of it, I imagined there was a small star that knew my name, a star that had been there the night I was born and would still be there long after my own story had ended. The thought didn't make me feel small. It made me feel held, like I was part of something vast and gentle that didn't need to be understood to be trusted. A small breeze stirred then, rustling the tops of the trees. It wasn't strong, just enough to make them sway slightly, enough to make their needles whisper together. That whisper rolled across the clearing like a slow tide. I closed my eyes and listened, and in the sound, I could almost hear voices, not human, not entirely, but the kind of voices that belong to places, to things older than language. The embers of the fire shifted, one falling slightly, sending up a tiny burst of sparks that winked out almost immediately. I thought about adding another log, but the truth was, I liked the fire as it was, low, warm, not demanding any attention. It was the kind of fire that didn't light the forest so much as it made it glow that I reached for the mug beside me, its contents still faintly warm. Chamomile tea, steeped earlier in the evening, had taken on a richer, earthier note now. Each sip felt like a small, slow exhale. The warmth of it spread gently through me, settling into my chest. Somewhere close by, there was the soft crack of a twig underfoot, not the heavy step of a person, but something lighter. I turned my head just enough to see, and there, near the edge of the firelight, stood a deer. Its coat caught the faint glow, its eyes reflecting the light like dark, liquid glass. For a long moment, it didn't move. Neither did I. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a slow grace, the deer lowered its head, nibbled at something on the ground, and lifted its gaze toward me again. We stayed like that, two quiet beings sharing the same air, until, as silently as it had appeared, the deer melted back into the trees. The moment left me feeling strangely full, as though I'd been given a gift I didn't even know to ask for. But I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and let my thoughts drift the way the smoke did, upward, unhurried. Out here, time didn't feel like it moved forward. It felt like it pulled around me, soft and still, as though the night could last forever if I let it. The sounds of the forest grew softer still. Even the owls had gone quiet now, as though they too were settling in. I could hear the faint hum of insects in the grass, the smallest click of a cooling ember, and somewhere in the distance, the murmur of a stream. That sound was low and constant, a gentle reminder that water was always moving somewhere. Even in the deepest part of night, that I glanced toward the tent. Inside, the sleeping bag was laid open, waiting. I knew that once I crawled in, the warmth of it would wrap around me instantly. But for now, I stayed where I was, watching the fire fade, watching the stars hold their quiet vigil. Eventually, when the embers were no more than a soft orange glow, I stood, brushed the faint chill from my blanket, and stepped into the tent. The air inside was cooler, but it smelled faintly of cedar from the mat beneath the sleeping bag. I slid in, pulling the zipper slowly until the sound of the forest outside was muffled but still there, like a lullaby that would carry me into sleep. As I lay down, the last thing I heard before my eyes closed was the forest breathing, steady, ancient, and endlessly patient. The forest had grown even quieter now, as though the whole world had settled into one shared, slow heartbeat. The air was cool and soft, scented faintly with pine and moist earth, the aroma unique to these ancient woods where time felt unhurried and infinite. Overhead, the stars scattered across the vast black sky shimmered like distant lanterns, their light weaving gentle patterns through the weaving branches. The moon, a pale guardian, cast silver pools upon the forest floor, turning moss and bark into a tapestry of shadows and light. The campfire before me had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, each one pulsing faintly like a quiet heartbeat. Every so often, a tiny spark would rise, flickering for a brief moment before dissolving into the cool air. I sat close, feeling the warmth on my skin, the gentle heat comforting against the growing chill of night. Around me, the forest breathed softly, leaves rustling with the slightest breeze, distant calls of night birds weaving through the silence, the subtle hum of insects in the undergrowth that I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, the fabric soft and familiar, wrapping me in a protective cocoon against the night. The scent of pine mingled with the faint smokiness from the fire, grounding me deeply in the moment. Each breath I took felt like a cleansing wave, washing away the weight of countless restless days and sleepless nights, leaving only calm and presence. My gaze drifted upward, tracing the silver branches that framed the starry sky. The constellations moved slowly across the heavens, ancient stories written in light, stories that had traveled across time, witnessed countless nights just like this one. Somewhere deep in their glow, I imagined a single star that knew my name, that had watched over me since my beginning and would continue to do so long after this night ended. The thought brought a quiet warmth to my heart, a sense of belonging to something vast and eternal that a soft breeze stirred the trees, their needles whispering secrets to the night. The sound was delicate, like a lullaby sung by the forest itself. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the forest song wash over me, each note a gentle promise of peace and rest. In the darkness behind my eyelids, images drifted, the slow ripple of a stream under moonlight, the silhouette of a deer moving silently through the brush, the steady glow of fireflies weaving their own dance of light. Time felt suspended. Minutes stretched and blurred, measured not by the clock, but by the rhythm of the natural world. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The fire's warmth ebbed and flowed, and my breath deepened. Slow and even like the forest's heartbeat, I thought of all the moments that had brought me here, the long days of rushing and noise, the endless lists of things to do, the scattered worries that clung like shadows. Out here, none of those things mattered. There was only this, the quiet embrace of night, the ancient pulse of the earth beneath me, the soft glow of embers fading into dawn. With every breath, I felt myself falling deeper into a space between waking and sleep, a place where time and thought loosened their grip and the soul could simply be. The forest had grown even quieter now, as though the whole world had settled into one shared, slow heartbeat. The air was cool and soft, scented faintly with pine and moist earth, the aroma unique to these ancient woods where time felt unhurried and infinite. Overhead, the stars scattered across the vast black sky shimmered like distant lanterns, their light weaving gentle patterns through the weaving branches. The moon, a pale guardian, cast silver pools upon the forest floor, turning moss and bark into a tapestry of shadows and light. The campfire before me had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, each one pulsing faintly like a quiet heartbeat. Every so often, a tiny spark would rise, flickering for a brief moment before dissolving into the cool air. I sat close, feeling the warmth on my skin, the gentle heat comforting against the growing chill of night. Around me, the forest breathed softly, leaves rustling with the slightest breeze, distant calls of night birds weaving through the silence, the subtle hum of insects in the undergrowth that I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, the fabric soft and familiar, wrapping me in a protective cocoon against the night. The scent of pine mingled with the faint smokiness from the fire, grounding me deeply in the moment. Each breath I took felt like a cleansing wave, washing away the weight of countless restless days and sleepless nights, leaving only calm and presence. My gaze drifted upward, tracing the silver branches that framed the starry sky. The constellations moved slowly across the heavens, ancient stories written in light, stories that had traveled across time, witnessed countless nights just like this one. Somewhere deep in their glow, I imagined a single star that knew my name, that had watched over me since my beginning and would continue to do so long after this night ended. The thought brought a quiet warmth to my heart, a sense of belonging to something vast and eternal that a soft breeze stirred the trees, their needles whispering secrets to the night. The sound was delicate, like a lullaby sung by the forest itself. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the forest song wash over me, each note a gentle promise of peace and rest. In the darkness behind my eyelids, images drifted, the slow ripple of a stream under moonlight, the silhouette of a deer moving silently through the brush, the steady glow of fireflies weaving their own dance of light. Time felt suspended. Minutes stretched and blurred, measured not by the clock, but by the rhythm of the natural world. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The fire's warmth ebbed and flowed, and my breath deepened. Slow and even like the forest's heartbeat, I thought of all the moments that had brought me here. The long days of rushing and noise, the endless lists of things to do, the scattered worries that clung like shadows. Out here, none of those things mattered. There was only this, the quiet embrace of night, the ancient pulse of the earth beneath me, the soft glow of embers fading into dawn. With every breath, I felt myself falling deeper into a space between waking and sleep, a place where time and thought loosened their grip and the soul could simply be. The forest's breath was slow and steady, a gentle rhythm that seemed to pulse beneath my skin. Every leaf, every twig, every drop of dew held a quiet story, whispered softly in the language of stillness. The cool air wrapped around me like a silk shawl, delicate and soothing. Somewhere nearby, the faint murmur of the stream traced its path over smooth stones, a silver thread weaving through the darkness. Its song was steady and unhurried, a lullaby for the restless earth that I shifted slightly, feeling the soft cushion of moss beneath me. The ground was alive yet comforting, a patchwork of softness and earth, inviting me to sink further into its embrace. Above, the constellations slowly shifted their positions, ancient sentinels watching over the night. The Great Bear moved with quiet majesty, its 7 stars bright against the black canvas. I let my eyes follow the gentle arc of the Milky Way, its pale glow reminding me of rivers flowing through forgotten places. The fire's warmth had faded into a gentle glow, casting long shadows that danced with the tree's sway. Occasionally, a spark would flicker upward like a tiny firefly before vanishing into the dark. The smell of smoke mixed with pine and wet earth was intoxicating in its purity, grounding me in the moment. I took a slow sip of the now cool tea, feeling the faint warmth linger as it traced a path down my throat. The wind stirred once more, its touch a whisper against my cheek, carrying the scent of blooming night flowers hidden deep in the forest. Their fragrance was subtle, a delicate sweetness that blended perfectly with the crispness of the night air. It was as if the forest itself was exhaling a secret just for me, a message of peace and renewal that I in the distance. A night bird called again, its voice melodic and soothing, like a soft song to the moon. The sound floated through the trees and seemed to mingle with the quiet rustle of leaves, creating a harmony of nature's own making. I closed my eyes, letting the melody wash over me, carrying away the last remnants of tension from my muscles and thoughts. Memories drifted softly to the surface, moments of hurried days, laughter shared with loved ones, quiet times of reflection. But here, under the vastness of the night sky, all those memories felt like leaves on a gentle stream, passing by, observed but not clung to. The forest invited me to release. To simply be that a soft rustle nearby caught my attention, and I opened my eyes slowly. Just beyond the firelight, a small family of rabbits moved carefully through the underbrush. Their fur glistened faintly in the ember glow, and their eyes reflected the stars. They paused for a moment, alert and curious, then vanished into the shadows with the grace only wild creatures possess. Watching them disappear, I felt a profound connection to this wild, peaceful world. It was a world untouched by the haste and clamor of everyday life, where time slowed and the soul could breathe freely. The night deepened further. The air cooled, and a faint mist began to rise from the forest floor, swirling gently around the bases of trees and curling over the soft moss. The mist shimmered in the moonlight, lending the landscape a dreamlike quality. It was as if I had stepped into a painting, one of endless tranquility and quiet wonder that I wrapped the blanket more tightly around myself and lay back, my head resting against the soft earth. The sky above was a vast ocean of stars, each one twinkling with gentle light. I traced patterns between them with my gaze, letting the constellations guide me deeper into calm. My breathing slowed even more, matching the timeless rhythm of the forest. With each inhale, I drew in peace and stillness. With each exhale, I released worry and fatigue. The border between waking and sleeping blurred, and I found myself drifting toward a place of rest. The forest seemed to hold me tenderly, as if cradling me in its ancient arms. The last spark of the fire faded, leaving only the soft glow of the moon and stars to keep watch. The night whispered its good-night lullaby, soft and endless. And there, beneath the endless sky, wrapped in the quiet heart of the forest, I finally surrendered to sleep. The forest had grown even quieter now, as though the whole world had settled into one shared, slow heartbeat. The air was cool and soft, scented faintly with pine and moist earth, the aroma unique to these ancient woods where time felt unhurried and infinite. Overhead, the stars scattered across the vast black sky shimmered like distant lanterns, their light weaving gentle patterns through the weaving branches. The moon, a pale guardian, cast silver pools upon the forest floor, turning moss and bark into a tapestry of shadows and light. The campfire before me had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, each one pulsing faintly like a quiet heartbeat. Every so often, a tiny spark would rise, flickering for a brief moment before dissolving into the cool air. I sat close, feeling the warmth on my skin, the gentle heat comforting against the growing chill of night. Around me, the forest breathed softly, leaves rustling with the slightest breeze, distant calls of night birds weaving through the silence, the subtle hum of insects in the undergrowth that I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, the fabric soft and familiar, wrapping me in a protective cocoon against the night. The scent of pine mingled with the faint smokiness from the fire, grounding me deeply in the moment. Each breath I took felt like a cleansing wave, washing away the weight of countless restless days and sleepless nights, leaving only calm and presence. My gaze drifted upward, tracing the silver branches that framed the starry sky. The constellations moved slowly across the heavens, ancient stories written in light, stories that had traveled across time, witnessed countless nights just like this one. Somewhere deep in their glow, I imagined a single star that knew my name, that had watched over me since my beginning and would continue to do so long after this night ended. The thought brought a quiet warmth to my heart, a sense of belonging to something vast and eternal that a soft breeze stirred the trees, their needles whispering secrets to the night. The sound was delicate, like a lullaby sung by the forest itself. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the forest song wash over me, each note a gentle promise of peace and rest. In the darkness behind my eyelids, images drifted, the slow ripple of a stream under moonlight, the silhouette of a deer moving silently through the brush, the steady glow of fireflies weaving their own dance of light. Time felt suspended. Minutes stretched and blurred, measured not by the clock, but by the rhythm of the natural world. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The fire's warmth ebbed and flowed, and my breath deepened. Slow and even like the forest's heartbeat, I thought of all the moments that had brought me here. The long days of rushing and noise, the endless lists of things to do, the scattered worries that clung like shadows. Out here, none of those things mattered. There was only this, the quiet embrace of night, the ancient pulse of the earth beneath me, the soft glow of embers fading into dawn. With every breath, I felt myself falling deeper into a space between waking and sleep, a place where time and thought loosened their grip and the soul could simply be. The forest's breath was slow and steady, a gentle rhythm that seemed to pulse beneath my skin. Every leaf, every twig, every drop of dew held a quiet story, whispered softly in the language of stillness. The cool air wrapped around me like a silk shawl, delicate and soothing. Somewhere nearby, the faint murmur of the stream traced its path over smooth stones, a silver thread weaving through the darkness. Its song was steady and unhurried, a lullaby for the restless earth that I shifted slightly, feeling the soft cushion of moss beneath me. The ground was alive yet comforting, a patchwork of softness and earth, inviting me to sink further into its embrace. Above, the constellations slowly shifted their positions, ancient sentinels watching over the night. The Great Bear moved with quiet majesty, its 7 stars bright against the black canvas. I let my eyes follow the gentle arc of the Milky Way, its pale glow reminding me of rivers flowing through forgotten places. The fire's warmth had faded into a gentle glow, casting long shadows that danced with the tree's sway. Occasionally, a spark would flicker upward like a tiny firefly before vanishing into the dark. The smell of smoke mixed with pine and wet earth was intoxicating in its purity, grounding me in the moment. I took a slow sip of the now cool tea, feeling the faint warmth linger as it traced a path down my throat. The wind stirred once more, its touch a whisper against my cheek, carrying the scent of blooming night flowers hidden deep in the forest. Their fragrance was subtle, a delicate sweetness that blended perfectly with the crispness of the night air. It was as if the forest itself was exhaling a secret just for me, a message of peace and renewal that I in the distance. A night bird called again, its voice melodic and soothing, like a soft song to the moon. The sound floated through the trees and seemed to mingle with the quiet rustle of leaves, creating a harmony of nature's own making. I closed my eyes, letting the melody wash over me, carrying away the last remnants of tension from my muscles and thoughts. Memories drifted softly to the surface, moments of hurried days, laughter shared with loved ones, quiet times of reflection. But here, under the vastness of the night sky, all those memories felt like leaves on a gentle stream, passing by, observed but not clung to. The forest invited me to release, to simply be that a soft rustle nearby caught my attention, and I opened my eyes slowly. Just beyond the firelight, a small family of rabbits moved carefully through the underbrush. Their fur glistened faintly in the ember glow, and their eyes reflected the stars. They paused for a moment, alert and curious, then vanished into the shadows with the grace only wild creatures possess. Watching them disappear, I felt a profound connection to this wild, peaceful world. It was a world untouched by the haste and clamor of everyday life, where time slowed and the soul could breathe freely. The night deepened further. The air cooled, and a faint mist began to rise from the forest floor, swirling gently around the bases of trees and curling over the soft moss. The mist shimmered in the moonlight, lending the landscape a dreamlike quality. It was as if I had stepped into a painting, one of endless tranquility and quiet wonder that I wrapped the blanket more tightly around myself and lay back, my head resting against the soft earth. The sky above was a vast ocean of stars, each one twinkling with gentle light. I traced patterns between them with my gaze, letting the constellations guide me deeper into calm. My breathing slowed even more, matching the timeless rhythm of the forest. With each inhale, I drew in peace and stillness. With each exhale, I released worry and fatigue. The border between waking and sleeping blurred, and I found myself drifting toward a place of rest. The forest seemed to hold me tenderly, as if cradling me in its ancient arms. The last spark of the fire faded, leaving only the soft glow of the moon and stars to keep watch. The night whispered its good-night lullaby, soft and endless. And there, beneath the endless sky, wrapped in the quiet heart of the forest, I finally surrendered to sleep.